Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2550 of The Tom Woods Show. We are with Candice Jackson today. Before I mention anything further about Candice Jackson, by the way, I have an unusual background. I've been doing, since I turned to video not too long ago, I'm always in my home office, but this time I'm in Las Vegas, baby. I'm recording away from home, so you're seeing my hotel suite in the background rather than the usual, rather intimidating series of bookcases you have typically in the background. But I'm so glad to talk to Candice Jackson, who I realized just this morning I had been reading for years and years, back when she co-authored a number of pieces with Bill Anderson, a scholar at the Mises Institute, on legal topics. And she is, of course, a lawyer, and she is also, or she was during the Trump administration, she was Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. And I have some questions related to that and questions related to another topic that's a bit of a bee in my bonnet, let's say, which is modern gender theory. And that tends to intersect quite a bit with the school. So there's plenty to talk about there. Well, Candice, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tom. I've been following your work for 2.5 decades or more through intersecting with the Mises Institute and Austrian economics. So it is a pleasure to talk to you. And I guess today, what is said in Vegas won't stay there, and that's okay.
No, that's right. That's right. That's right. Well, of all places I could be, if I can't be in my home office broadcasting, why not? Why not from Las Vegas, where my wife was born and raised in Las Vegas. So people think of it as just a vacation spot, but for us, it's for her, it's home. So we do visit here from time to time. So anyway, let's talk about, first of all, was it Betsy DeVos who knew you and suggested you for this position? How did that even work before we get into the juicy fun stuff?
Actually, my connection at the time to being introduced to Secretary DeVos was Peter Thiel, because he's a Stanford guy and a good libertarian leaning Stanford guy at that. And so he was involved with the transition back in 2016, early 2017. And so that was my connection into formally being appointed in the Trump administration.
Okay. And I guess, and again, I have a lot of topics that are related to what you did that I want to talk about, but I'm also interested just in the process, and in what it's like suddenly to be thrust into the public eye. Now, you weren't obviously the Secretary of Education, and Betsy DeVos dealt with a lot of let's say, annoying people saying annoying things. But even you, nevertheless, had to deal with critics. I mean, it's easy if you want to find critics of you and me. Your local search engine will turn up plenty of them. Yeah. But what was it? Were they complaining about you before you even started, or was it?
Oh yeah.
So they didn't even give you that courtesy. Okay.
Oh no. And this position did not have to be Senate confirmed, so there was that under the radar level. But once I was appointed and started working on the HuffPost type exposés, etc., complained very, very, very much so that somebody would lead the Office for Civil Rights for Education, having come from a background of being very skeptical of policies that pushed things like affirmative action and race preferences in schools. That was something I was picked on very heavily for. And then just generally, anybody who's right of center on anything is going to get automatically labeled as somehow, I guess, anti-civil rights. It's a lightning rod position no matter what, just because the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Education has tended to handle a lot of highly controversial issues over the last 10 or 15 years. It was the Obama-Biden administration, for instance, that kind of funneled through the Department of Education a lot of the pro-gender identity policies that we're still grappling with today. In 2017 to 2020, one of the huge issues for us was how colleges and universities and even high schools were dealing with sexual harassment and allegations of sexual assault on campuses under Title IX. And so there's always been a controversy to the Office for Civil Rights in our modern era. So knowing that it was a lightning rod position was something I was eyes wide open to going in.
So it seems like they're in effect micromanaging the education of kids the idea that there should be one place ordering everybody in the country what they should think about X, Y, or Z, or how they should handle particular cases. So it means that a disciplinarian in a school has to worry, well, let's see, I don't know if I've disciplined people in proportion to their representation in the population, so I may have to worry about some federal bureaucrat coming at me for that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay. So in my view, to steel man where the progressive side is coming from on that, the concept that they start from is, all right, the federal government gives a significant amount of money to schools, and anti-discrimination laws like Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act or Title IX of the 1972 Education Amendments. Those laws stand for non-discrimination. And so if a school or a district or a college is going to accept federal largesse, then yes, there are going to be some strings attached. And in theory, that's going to consist of not using federal dollars to promote overt discrimination. I have actually no problem with that as a theory. The problem is, of course, that it does get into not just micromanaging, but micromanaging from a very different conceptual starting point, which is what is discrimination even? Because in the example that you're talking about, under calling it a violation of Title VI, not to discriminate against students based on race, that you're supposed to see some sort of equality or proportionality with respect to school discipline and demographics, especially racial demographics that students belong to. You have to step back and question, well, if we're looking at disparities and numbers aren't matching up to the proportion that a group represents in the population, you can't just jump to assuming that is all down to illegal, unfair, prejudicial discrimination, as opposed to other explanations for some disparities in statistics like that.
And not to mention, I had a professor years ago. He's deceased now, Stefan Thernstrom, and he wrote a number of books on this general subject. And one of his books did briefly touch on this issue of disparities in discipline. And he noted that when we're dealing with Black students, it was Black teachers who were more likely to report Black students for disciplinary problems. So, I mean, it's not quite the angels and devils scenario that presented to us. So while you were there, you also had to deal with the subject of sexual assault on campus.
Yeah.
And there, the issue has gone back and forth with do you, quote, believe all women? We hear these statistics that only 2% of claims of sexual assault turn out to be fabricated. So it's overwhelmingly likely that the woman is telling the truth. So you should believe all women. So that has meant that men have sometimes been put in a position that seems unfair, and it's hard for them to defend themselves even when they are innocent. So what's the truth of the matter there, and what did you try to do about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, Tom, talking about men and women is so 2018. We don't know who the men are and who the women are anymore, right?
Yeah.
What we had to grapple with respect to how colleges and universities and K through 12 schools handle allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault was realizing that schools had slid into or been pushed into by policies under the Obama-Biden administration of leaping to overcorrect. Because I after all of the studying up and research and evidence that I took in as a government official there, I do think that in decades past, schools were more than happy to cover things up and ignore problems like this and sweep things under the rug. overcorrecting, though, started to look like railroading individuals for a bigger picture. So if the bigger picture is take sexual assault accusations on campus more seriously, the overcorrection was leaping to believe any complainant who comes forward, punish the alleged offender, and don't worry very much about things like fair process or due process. So that was the issue or the problem that we aimed to correct. Made worse was the fact that nothing the Department of Education had done prior to the Trump administration in this regard involved actual legally binding regulations. There was no legal clarity. These rules that the Education Department and Office for Civil Rights started prosecuting schools under were guidance documents. And so it was just far from clear what the legal obligations of schools should be. So we tried to bring a lot of clarity to things, starting with let's even have a defensible definition of what sexual harassment and sexual assault are, and then let's spell out procedures that are designed to help a school get to the truth of a factual situation, so that you don't err on either side. You don't not vindicate and protect somebody who has come forward having been harmed in this way, and you don't punish somebody who actually didn't do the assault that they're accused of. So it's that kind of fact finding that we put into actual binding regulations, so that a fair process, a uniform, predictable set of due process procedures would be in place across the board.
I would guess one of the problems, though, just because of the nature of these kinds of cases, is that it really is a matter of he said, she said. I suppose it's possible that from time to time there are witnesses or there's physical evidence of some kind. Mm-hmm. In the overwhelming majority of cases, it's a matter of a woman accuses a man, and the man says he didn't do it, and then you're just at an impasse. Like, I don't know what you do in the case like that.
Yeah, I mean, the legal systems have had to work with and around that problem of no direct corroborating evidence for a long time.
Yeah. Since time immemorial, I suppose.
Yes, those are those issues are problems, but we have to do something. And so we went about it from a couple of perspectives. One was the more checks and balances in the procedures that can be set up, the more likely it is that it's not going to be skewed to a predetermined outcome for one side or the other ahead of time. And it's not impossible. Of course, this is what juries do every day, is fact finding in terms of credibility and believability, and some of that is logic and common sense and so forth. And then the other side of it was we put into the rules that regardless of whether an alleged victim wanted to have the school go through a formal process that might end up in punishing the alleged offender, regardless of whether that process ever went forward, the alleged victim, without having to prove anything, is actually entitled to what we called supportive measures from the school, things that are non-punitive to the alleged offender, but can be very helpful all the same to somebody who raises their hand up and says, I just experienced this and I'm having I'm having a hard time dealing with it. So, some extra time to make up a test, or having a mutual no contact order in place. So, there are steps that could be taken to help people, even in situations where there just isn't enough evidence to go down the path of saying, yep, it's been proved now that, this violation occurred.
Hey, everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you are getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you are a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. Or what if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking, meeting places getting shut down? Use your website as a lead generation engine. Or what if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO's expert search engine optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Did you do your work physically in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. Yep.
So you moved to D.C., now you've moved back out to the West Coast?
Yeah. It
Okay.
was bi-coastal living for 4 years. Tough
Okay.
on family life, but
Yeah, no doubt. So that means that even though you were dealing with legal issues, you nevertheless got an up-close look at how the Department of Education functions. Is that safe to say?
that's safe to say.
I have no idea what your expectations were going in, thinking about how the Department of Education probably functions. But having come out of that scenario, are there any particular features of the way it's run or the kinds of things it does that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, one dynamic that I just wouldn't have had any way of gauging before going on the inside of a government agency like that was the interplay and pros and cons of the way that our system works with respect to political appointees versus career staff in a government agency. And my experience ended up being that I think that a lot of right of center folks don't give career staff enough credit. I think it probably changes agency to agency, but I think that maybe in agencies where there tend to be a larger proportion of lawyers. For whatever reason, I found the career staff in the education department to be largely able to separate their own political and policy preferences from the work that they were doing, and have a fairly overall productive relationship with the political appointee leadership. Hearing from colleagues, that's not the same in every agency, though.
But I mean, did you think, did you walk in there, or let's say, did you leave there thinking this thing needs to be shut down, this thing needs to be improved, like, and did your experience there influence your opinion?
Yes,
I know I'm putting you on the spot with this.
Yeah,
one.
it is. I think political memes that go around in election time make it too simplistic to say shut down the Department of Education or you're evil if you want to shut down the Department of Education. It is a little bit too simplistic. I think there are some. Okay, let's put it this way: the two largest operations within the Department of Education, I believe, would have to be the Federal Student Aid office, which is huge and deals with tons and tons and tons of money because that's college financial aid, and then second to that and much smaller than that actually is the Civil Rights Office. I think that I've done a lot of thinking after leaving the administration that they're probably both of those operations within the education department would be more efficient somewhere else in the government. And then what's left? Not a whole lot that couldn't just be block granted to schools. So from a operational and efficiency point of view, I think that we could do just fine eliminating the education department as a standalone agency, and there would be some functions that would get folded into other parts of the government. And then some things, because of making that change, would probably have a salubrious effect on school districts and colleges and universities feeling a lot less micromanaged.
All right. I know that you've written on, I want to talk about gender theory a bit. And I know you've written on LGBT issues in general. So before we do that, I want to ask you maybe the most boomer question I've asked in over 2,500 Tom Woods Show episodes. And if it is a boomer question, I want you to feel free to put me in my place, okay?
You got it.
All right. And it has to do with categorizing people who are quote unquote asexual as belonging to the, I don't know, continuum or to the group of people, categories of people who are contained under the LGBTQ plus rainbow, so to speak. And the reason I wonder about this is I think, well, if I were the president of the local chess club and I thought, I want to see people from all walks of life playing chess, I would think to myself, well, I want to appeal to the old and the young. I'll say, this chess club has old and young, it has black and white, it has rich and poor, and it also has people who don't play chess. Like that would seem like an odd thing for me to say, right? So is that a bad analogy? Can you explain to me, is that bad?
It's not a bad analogy, but I think the critique that analogy demonstrates doesn't even go far enough. And that to me is because the alphabet soup around LGBTQIA plus blah blah blah, it is in and of itself incoherent. It has become antisocial. It's become very destructive. So it's not even just a matter of of squashing together things that don't belong together. It really has become kind of intentionally a vehicle to disrupt society, which is very unfortunate for ordinary lesbian and gay Americans who were very pleased with securing a fairly widespread level of tolerance for homosexuality as such, and now continue to see letters kind of thrown into an acronym that makes no sense and often works against any kind of vision of non-discrimination and tolerance in a pluralistic society. Asexuality in particular is bothersome and offensive to me to try to include as any kind of civil rights cause, even if it was a standalone, even if it wasn't being combined with LGB. I think it's weird to make it a political cause or a non-discrimination cause, starting with the fact that I'm not sure asexuality is a sexual orientation. And then second, because of the way that it is combined right now with the gender identity and trans and queer ideologies and movement overall, you put those two things together and it's actually outright appalling, I think, because you're promoting asexuality at the same time that you are promoting more and more people being allowed or urged or facilitated in losing sexual function due to sex denial. So it's a very highly suspect new political movement to start treating asexuality as though it's some immovable sexual orientation that needs a civil rights movement around it, and as though it's not springing up coincidentally at the exact same time that we're pushing large cohorts of people to lose their sexual maturity and their sexual function and potential for sexual pleasure.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Dr. Miriam Grossman, who's a psychiatrist who deals in this, or maybe now I'm doubting myself. I can't remember. She may be in psychology, but all the same, I asked her, it seems like the side that's pushing these various ideas is able to say for itself, look, we have the support of practically every major medical association you can think of. Mm-hmm. So we have the science on our side. And you folks on the other side are refusing to accept what the science has found in a way that is grossly prejudicial to the well-being of a great many Americans who are suffering and whose suffering can be alleviated by the application of various procedures that we are familiar with. But and these have the full endorsement of the relevant medical associations. So who the heck are you, a handful of cranks, compared to all the professional societies? What's the answer to that?
Yeah, it's a naked appeal to authority, and in the realm of what's sprung up to be called gender medicine, it is absolutely true that right now, currently in the United States, every major medical association is pro-affirmation model. That is a true statement. It is not true, however, that the science or medical evidence is conclusively or even heavily supportive of gender affirming care as any kind of treatment or ethical course of medicine, and that really gets down to the reason for that is that our medical associations, at least on this gender issue, have never themselves bothered to conduct systematic evidence reviews or original research, etc. They have looked solely to the authority of WPATH, World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And then when you start peeling back what WPATH promotes in its documents that they call standards of care for so-called gender medicine, it too has been recently, just this year, recently revealed to have covered up original research and to have ignored evidence-based studies, et cetera, to further a political agenda. So it's not unique to gender medicine, but I think gender medicine is a primary example of the way that in the United States, a lot of professional organizations have become political organizations. They're not actually tracking and promoting evidence-based medicine. They are promoting and tracking an activist agenda, and that's becoming more and more clear. The more that these organizations are held accountable for trying to explain why they're holding a pro-affirmation position. They have no reason except a predetermined conclusion. This is a right. You can't stop human rights. We have to go this direction because everybody has a right to this. But that's not medical evidence. That's a political conclusion. And again, pointing to to an organization like WPATH. So they're not. They're even ambivalent, these organizations in the U.S., about whether more evidence or better quality evidence is even desirable. They've kind of made up their minds.
Everybody, I am so proud to be part of and presenting at the Expat Money Summit, the world's largest offshore event, taking place entirely online from October 7th to 11th. It's put on by our old friend Mikkel Thorup, who is host of the Expat Money Show. He's a repeat Tom Woods Show guest and a highly sought-after expat consultant with over 2 decades of experience. Discover why international diversification is a must for those looking to preserve their liberty and wealth. There has never been a more urgent time to develop a Plan B. And here's where you can learn everything you need to know about crafting your perfect Plan B. How to quickly acquire a second passport, diversify your finances offshore, invest in international real estate, and get in-depth insights on geopolitics from world-renowned experts. Headline speakers include names that will be familiar to you, including old Tom Woods here, Scott Horton, Doug Casey, Ron Paul, Mark Faber, Tom Luongo, and more. To reserve your complimentary ticket, head over to expatmoneysummit.com. That's expatmoneysummit.com. Well, what about people who say, though, why does this even matter to you? I mean, if your own children aren't showing any interest in any of this, then all you're doing is just interfering in the peaceful pursuit of other people of what they think will bring them happiness and fulfillment. Yeah. So why do you care so much?
I care very, very much. And the line in I think, Enlightenment values, small L liberal society has always been balancing between individual freedom of expression and the rights of others, and gender identity put into laws and official policies and institutionalized throughout our society the concept itself of gender identity wreaks havoc for, I will say, everyone. For one thing, we all have a sex and we all have a sexual orientation. And when you are living under an official system that disregards the reality of sex, that does affect everyone. I would contend affects girls and women even more than boys and men. Everyone is affected by losing the right to freely speak and even use words that align with our perception of reality. This is a man, this is a woman. We're not allowed to say that anymore under policies that truly enforce the concept of gender identity. And then you have in my view, the kind of inversion of the very purpose of medicine and healthcare, which is to promote and restore health and function of mind and body. And this is a movement that what they call healthcare is intentional infliction of dysfunction to healthy bodies in the service of promoting or manifesting, what starts to sound like a very religious internal experience. So it's perverting or inverting the very purpose of our medical system as well, which affects all of us too. Then you get into, schools and if you're going to treat gender identity as fact and teach it in schools and immerse kids in it, then in my view, you've just corrupted education, because now we're forcing biology textbooks and all kinds of academic resources to shy away from the simple truth and reality that humans are sexually dimorphic and we're each male or female, and that's not something that changes despite feelings. We're teaching just the opposite of that. So we're teaching fiction as fact in schools. I just see it as a broad issue that goes well beyond, hey, just leave people alone. I think that was an argument that worked for tolerance of homosexuality to a large extent, and doesn't work with gender identity, precisely because if you truly believe that gender identity takes precedence over or determines or can change someone's sex, you can't then have a society that classifies things or tracks things based on sex and based on gender identity. You have to choose one.
The matter of women's sports now is, of course, a matter of great controversy. And this is an area where I would think it would be the Justice Department, but I guess it could be, I don't even know what the Leviathan layout of all the different civil rights divisions would be. I didn't even know there was one in the Department of Education until I looked up your bio. But some wing of the regime, it seems, could potentially tell every single school district in America exactly how to handle this situation. And I had this naive view that we lived in a decentralized republic based on local self-government. Well, not anymore. So the standard thing is to say that this is going to destroy women's sports. But I think what it also does is it forces absolutely everybody to take a public stance on something they don't want to take a public stance on. A lot of people just want to live their lives. They don't want to be involved in controversy, but it pulls everybody into it. And everybody now has to make a stand and say, I'm for this, I'm against this. I mean, I suppose that's a good clarifying thing, but it means it involves the politicization of everybody, and all of it worms its way into every aspect of society, because now maybe could be that you can think of almost every occupation, every as you say, like biology textbooks, everything has to be revolutionized in order to accommodate this. Mm-hmm. Nothing is left unturned, and so now every coach in America now has to figure, well, now what am I supposed to do?
Yep.
So what is going to happen with women's sports? There's a bit of a pushback, but don't you get kind of the sense that they're pushing back against an inevitability?
Yes, in a sense, I think it's I think it's inevitable that basic reality will eventually will win out. Women's sports and maybe women's prisons are the polling issues, for example, that more people on any other topic are willing to say no, this is not okay. But you're right that gender identity and the way it conflicts with sex categories and sex classifications it does force everybody into coming down on one side or the other, and that's not a bug, it's a feature. I mean, the intent of this movement is traced back to its roots in queer theory and this sort of kind of fake academia around it, growing out of a postmodern movement that really truly would like us to believe that we can create and recreate our own reality, that there is nothing objective about the material world. And so, yeah, we are being pressed to upend everything in all facets, and we are going to have to all take a stand one way or the other. I think it's important to keep in mind that for consistency's sake, I think the pro-gender identity crowd has to win in every area. They can't back down on any area and admit, for example, that, okay, fine, it's not fair for sports. And so, we'll continue sex classification, not identity in sports, but not other places, because either a male is a male, right? Or a male is a female. And they have to keep this up in every aspect.
Right. Once they concede that, the whole edifice crumbles.
It does.
Once they concede it in one place. So to what extent does this have to do with people who feel like, because we hear about gender dysphoria, but we also, I think, are facing a situation where some people, because they don't conform to stereotypes we have around men and women, also get talked into the idea, and I think this is different from gender dysphoria. They get talked into the idea that maybe because you like things that are traditionally associated with men or traditionally associated with women, that you really are a man or a woman.
Good.
And so how much of it is coming from that?
Well, I mean, there's a huge conflation and confusion between are we making accommodations for people with a diagnosis that we're calling gender dysphoria, or are we recognizing some innate human right to self-expression and self-identity that requires no diagnosis? There's nothing pathological about it. Those are two different avenues that are being allowed to coexist and kind of be used as a rationale for policies at whichever one seems to be more beneficial at the time. I think that they cross over, though, and there's no bright line between the two of them, because if you look even at the criteria for a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, you are going to find a lot of self-reporting diagnostic questions, for instance, that revolve precisely around sex stereotypes. Do you like playing with boys instead of girls? Do you feel uncomfortable, wearing things that are supposed to be for girls? I mean, it's very stereotype based to begin with. So it's not. It is not clear at all what we're even diagnosing, even if we're willing to stay within a framework of there's something being diagnosed and now we need to treat and accommodate it in medicine, law, and society.
If you're a libertarian and you're concerned about, let's say, the size and scope of government, what in particular do you have to fear about this movement? Because you could say that there's no reason that this movement has to be enforced coercively. It could just be a voluntary thing that you might still oppose, but at least it's being done voluntarily. What's the danger here by which the state gets involved?
Well, the state has to stay involved through coercive laws, for instance, that force everybody to affirm, validate, respect subjective gender identities, because that is not most people's natural perception of human beings and of the world. We are evolved to perceive human sex, male or female, and forcing us to pretend that perception is irrelevant or wrong is requiring a lot of coercive state power behind it. Because the movement behind gender identity is touting it as a civil rights movement, an entitlement movement. State funding for medical treatments is taken as a need or as a given, that this is life-saving and therefore has to be provided by Medicaid and Medicare and insurance companies and public funding of all kinds. And the responsibility of government to track accurate information has to be changed in terms of data collection. Even we can't even rely on government to take accurate census in any regard anymore if the facts that are being collected are allowed to be subjectified.
You mentioned the claim that these are life-saving medicines and procedures, because if you don't do it, then suicide will occur, and that would then be used as justification for including these kinds of things as mandatory within Medicaid and so on. But where do you think we stand in terms of evidence regarding a claim like that in fact, because what seems to happen is, let's just be blunt here. In a lot of cases, people who are involved in the trans movement have mental problems. That's just, or I would say a lot of people who have autism tend to be drawn into this movement. Yeah. So in some cases, it seems like it's the reverse causality, that the sort of person who would be unstable enough to be suicidal is also drawn to this. So how do we figure out is the dog wagging the tail, or is what's causing what? Do we have any way of saying definitively that yes, unfortunately, the case is that you just have to provide these medicines and these procedures, because otherwise you will have an epidemic of suicides?
No,
we have the evidence for that.
There's no high quality evidence of that. There's just no evidence at all that the suicide or even suicidality threat that has gained a lot of momentum for the pro-gender transition side. There's just no evidence that is accurate or true. Even more fundamentally, the notion that feeling suicidal or feeling depressed over not getting to do something that is bad for society, there's no conceptual or philosophical or principled reason to think that that's the correct, that giving into that conceding and being manipulated by a threat of potential suicidality is the correct way to handle cohorts of people who feel suicidal or threaten to feel suicidal. That's just not the way. It is cart before the horse, in the sense of if something is objectively bad and has objectively bad results and bad outcomes, but I want it or I'll kill myself, that there's no other realm I can think of where as a society we cave to that and we say, oh my goodness, well then of course we'll give you the objectively bad thing that harms yourself and harms the rest of society, because we have to avoid the suicide threat. That there are other ways of dealing with suicidality.
Do you, by the way, have a Substack? I didn't even look into this.
Nope, not on Substack right now. So I share I share thoughts and observations on mainly the gender issues on X right now. So you can always find me at CE Jackson Law there.
Okay, C.E. Jackson law?
Right.
Okay, so this is a situation where I think a lot of people just feel helpless. They feel like this is a movement that is occurring, that is being forced on them in ways they can't repel. They wouldn't even know where would be the beginning of the process of repelling it. How do I push back against it? Do you have any advice to give people as to practical things they can do, maybe on a small scale, to try to reverse this?
Yeah, I think I would encourage people trust your perceptions and have conversations or raise objections in the form of questions. I have found to be very effective, especially in the school context. I talk to and consult with a lot of parents who are concerned about these issues in their school, and often more inroads are made by just asking questions, because a lot of the gender premises are illogical. They're not even internally consistent. So just asking, well, but you're talking about you're reading a book in class that talks about a girl who didn't like wearing dresses. But my girl doesn't like wearing dresses. Are you saying she's a boy? I mean, just the simplest questions can start to kind of probe into how there's a lack of non-contradiction going on. There's a circularity in their definitions of things. Gender identity is the personal sense of gender. Okay, what's gender? What do you mean by gender then? And oftentimes just being bold enough to internally feel secure that you're not crazy for wondering if this is off base, because you're right, it is off base. And then calmly asking questions about what you're being told from this ideology is as effective as maybe you can be.
Well, it is it is a masterclass, really, in how you take an idea that was so out of the mainstream that you wouldn't even say it was on the fringes. It wasn't anywhere. It wasn't anywhere.
Yeah.
And it went from being, in effect, nowhere, or maybe in the corners of a few academic departments somewhere, to now absolutely dominating the cultural landscape in the U.S. and in other Western countries. It is astonishing. It is a case study in fact, I don't know what it is a case study of. Is it a case study of manipulation, of of propaganda, of the forming of public opinion? I don't know. So it's a whole bunch of things. So just observing how quickly that happened leaves you just breathless. I didn't think something like this could happen so fast, to the point where now we're not even saying, well, this is an interesting new idea that I guess we'll have to consider. No, it is let's say all the respectable opinion molders all believe it, and half your neighbors believe it. And you could say to them, but look, 10 years ago, you would have thought this was crazy. So why should I believe you're right now when you were that wrong 10 years ago by your own admission? Maybe you're wrong now. I mean, how can I trust anything you say if you could be so unstable that you could go from having exactly the opposite view from this to embracing it to the point of wanting to demonize and ostracize anybody who disagrees? It's just amazing how quickly it swept the board.
Yeah, it is. I think it was there was a very successful campaign built around human rights organizations that had, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, focused on gay rights. And once enough of those rights were secured, there was a bit of a vacuum. And it was, I think that's been a huge part of the structural way that this ideology has managed to infiltrate institutions and affect policymakers, is just labeling it gay 2.0. This is the next frontier. Got to do it. We don't want to go back. We don't want to be on the wrong side of that kind of issue again. It's disturbing because there's nothing, not only nothing in common, but again, denying sex is, I believe, harmful to homosexuals, and the idea of a sexual orientation being straight or gay, it kind of disrupts that entire concept. But that's how it's been allowed to, I think, infiltrate in a lot of institutions.
Well, if this is gay 2.0, what's 3.0?
Well, I think there are many on the gender critical side of things who would say that that the gender identity movement is just at the tip of the transhumanist iceberg.
I've heard that. Well, who knows? Who knows? But I appreciate what you're doing. I don't even know how. As I said, I'd read some of your articles quite some time ago, really long time ago, but I remembered them distinctly because you guys were talking about pretty important things back then. And then I just came across you on X, so-called Twitter, and I didn't make the connection, but I looked through your feed. I must have seen some tweet from you. And I looked through your feed and I thought, gee, every single thing this person retweets is great and writes is great. And so I said, well, doggone it, we definitely have to talk. And it seemed like we knew some of the same people.
Yep.
So now I understand. So at CE Jackson Law is where you go to follow you. I'll put that link at tomwoods.com/2550. Also in the video description below this video, we'll have that link. And I should mention that right around the time that I'm releasing this episode, I have the collection of Woods ebooks has increased by 1. And it so happens that I have finally released Your Facebook Friends Are Wrong About Gender. And you can get that for free at wrongaboutgender.com. This is my official podcast announcement of that. Candice, thanks so much. This was very valuable.
So nice to talk to you too, Tom.
I appreciate that. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.